Sony are already hard at work designing the PlayStation 6, and the man responsible for leading the project is none other than the legendary Mark Cerny, at least according to some rumours that are swirling around the internet right now. There's a lot of stuff to dig through here, and of course we're going to get into all of this after this message from the video's sponsor.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by whokeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out whokeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
This rumour, as many tend to do, has originated from Twitter, with Worry Wart Gamer stating that according to his sources, Mark Cerny is going to be the lead on the PlayStation 6 project. Now, of course, with any rumour, you should take this with a grain of salt, but in my opinion, Mark Cerny leading this is logical, and I've had a number of people asking me my opinion on this, so, well, that's why we're producing this video, because not only have I heard a couple of very interesting rumours myself, I think it just makes sense to kind of tackle that this is actually a logical thing for the PlayStation 6 to already be in the very early stages of design. So even if their leak is only a guess, logically Mark Cerny's involvement just makes a lot of sense. He was of course involved in the PlayStation 4 as well as PlayStation 5, and well, they are stating that this will be the third generation of console that he is involved in. Now technically speaking, this is somewhat true, because he was also involved in the PlayStation Vita, which was actually a really good console, very good, an amazing handheld actually. It was super powerful for the time of launch. However, that is not a mainline console, of course, it's not a home console, so you can argue that generation-wise it is a little bit different. And there was also the PlayStation 4 Pro, but like the Xbox One X, it was part of kind of the 8th generation of systems, and it's not like a generation on itself. So the first question a couple of people have already asked me: would Sony already be working on the PlayStation 6? Well, according to murmurs from Sony and Xbox with the whole Activision thing, the next generation of systems are scheduled to launch sometime around 2028, basically let's say a 12-month window. So roughly speaking, this would put the time frame between the PS5 and PS6 as similar to the PS4 and PS5. Now, work started on the PlayStation 5 back in 2015. Studios were already being approached by Sony, asking them basically what their pain points was with the 8th generation of systems. This is according to a Wired interview with Mark Cerny, and this was dated back in 2019, before the PlayStation 5 was officially revealed. The overwhelming response for both Microsoft and Sony basically was, of course, the slow Jaguar processors inside the console and the absence of fast storage, not only in terms of the speed, but also the response time because of the mechanical drive used in the 8th generation devices. Now, the PS4 was launched in late 2013, the same time frame as the Xbox One, so it's very logical that this same time frame would happen again. Typically, the industry works in cycles, particularly when planning, designing and launching a console. Now, to be clear, I do not think that at this stage the hardware itself exists in any type of recognizable advanced physical form. For example, you wouldn't see like a development kit or even ironed out specifications, but I am pretty damn certain that Sony as well as Microsoft are already speaking to potential partners and looking at roadmaps to see which potential partners are working on and also the features. So what about the partners? Well, there are a number of partners that both companies could go with. Speaking for a moment with Sony, then they could go, of course, with Intel or AMD if they wanted to go the x86 route, or potentially Nvidia if they wanted to go with ARM. For example, Nvidia are customizing, kind of creating their own ARM CPUs known as Grace. That's a whole different topic in and of itself, but yeah. In fact, I've actually had more than one person tell me that Sony and Nvidia have actually somewhat rebuilt their relationship. Now, pretty famously, Nvidia and Sony's relationship went sour with the PlayStation 3. There's not anything surprising there. Everyone knows this. but allegedly it's gotten much better in recent months and years. And apparently there was some discussion with Nvidia and Sony over the PlayStation 6. However, a number of other people have told me that while their relationship has improved, it is certainly not going to lead to the PlayStation 6 utilizing Nvidia hardware. Not only because AMD have been a great partner, but just for business reasons as well as technical reasons, keeping with AMD just makes a lot of sense. So while Nvidia does have tensor-core technology, and this leads to great things like denoising for ray tracing and path tracing, and Nvidia's path tracing and ray tracing performance is ahead of AMD, and this is likely going to continue with RDNA 4, which is going to launch in 2024, competing against Nvidia's Blackwell technology, which is powering RTX 50. AMD's tech is very flexible. They've recently purchased Linux, and this provides AMD a lot of flexible options for various accelerated technologies, including AI engines. We've recently seen in an interview with 4Gamer, AMD have stated that their vision for gaming is to utilize AI for improving, let's say, the non-playable characters, in-game characters, and this is incredibly important. Now, this is speculation on my part, but I think given Sony's push towards virtual reality, single-player experiences, and other obvious moves in gaming, plus their, obvious involvement in interactive entertainment and movies, I think it's fair to say that AI in gaming will also be an extremely important direction for Sony to go forward with. We've also seen a recent presentation from Lisa Su, who is AMD's CEO. This was ISSCC. A preview was given an advanced server system, which of course is very different from gaming, yes. However, there were huge amounts of on-die cache. Well, technically it's 3D stacked, lots of memory. Massive amounts of GPU and CPU power, and other capabilities can be customized as needed. Now, this will look very different for a console for obvious reasons, like you won't see, a die size of this magnitude, but I would not be surprised if we do see some type of stacked DRAM to provide tons of bandwidth to the CPU and GPU, which is going to be some type of shared memory space, low access times. Just a few nanoseconds can make a huge difference. So going out to, let's say, GDDR7, which I'm assuming is going to be pretty prevalent at that point, can actually definitely hurt performance. Naturally, there'll also be a ton of other customizations that we can expect for either the Xbox or the PlayStation. Now, a tendency that a lot of tech heads tend to have, and I'm counting myself within this, that I'm guilty of it as well, is we tend to say, well, at this time frame, X is going to be available for AMD, Y is going to be available for this company. Let's make a guess and try to kind of figure out what the specifications of a console will be. But honestly, it's not that simple. What you should instead do is actually do the reverse. So rather than say, well, let's hypothetically say that we were trying to guess the specifications of the, let's say, PlayStation 5. Let's ignore, the amount of memory and all that stuff. Let's just be really simple and say it has 8 CPU cores, and it has X amount of GPU performance. Well, if you don't know necessarily all of the hardware specifications of what they were going with, you can instead do the reverse and say, well, what would logically Sony have wanted for this generation? We know that 4K TV screens are becoming more common. We know that at this point, ray tracing was being pretty, pushed for gaming, on PC anyway. We know that, let's just face it, hard drives are not exactly ideal for gaming performance, and you can kind of work backwards. So instead, ask yourself, what would you expect of a future generation? And then ask, well, what would empower developers? And what, of course, would be realistic? Because you can easily say, well, it's going to have 700 CPU cores, 25,000 gigabytes of RAM. Obviously that's just ridiculous because there are, limitations in terms of power consumption, in terms of heat output, and just as importantly, cost. Now, cost, you can slightly increase it per generation, and we've seen that quite kind of historically, but you cannot ask someone to cough up $2,000-3,000 for a console. I also want to mention something more about the PlayStation 5 Pro and Xbox Series Pro because I'm still getting questions about this. Honestly, I do not know what is happening right now. I've had high levels of confidence that they were being worked on. In fact, one of the people who shared the information leaked a ton of info that was correct about several things for desktop PC parts, including GPUs. Their info was totally spot on. So back when I first got the info about the PS5 Pro, I was told that the performance targets were a minimum of 2 times the base PS5 model and up to 2.5 times the PS5's ray tracing performance. But after I leaked that, there was also a patent which became publicly available from Sony, and this basically shows ray tracing technology that the PS5's GPU cannot do. I've covered this patent before, but basically speaking, it is much more efficient in ray tracing performance and is a lot more similar to, say, RDNA 3, possibly a little bit later, but at the very minimum RDNA 3. Now, this is almost certainly for a PlayStation 5 Pro. Again, neither the Xbox Series or PlayStation 5 GPUs can handle this. I think also Alex Battaglia discussed this also, and he also came to the same conclusion that it's not RDNA 2. So it doesn't make sense for this to be for the PS6. The reason is because ray tracing technology of this, generation would be old by the time the PS6 got released. So even if AMD is using RDNA, most likely it would be a different generation. So RDNA 4, from what I understand, launches in 2024 according to some leaks as well as some roadmaps. RDNA 5 is most likely going to be 2026 or 2027, so that would mean RDNA 5 or 6, assuming they're using RDNA at that point, like AMD could be using an entire new graphics IP. So it's almost certainly it's going to be RDNA 5 or 6 by the PS6's launch. This is based on, historically, AMD and Nvidia launching new generations of desktop GPUs every 2 to 3 years. So it's very possible the PS5 Pro or the Xbox Pro are cancelled, possibly specs have been changed considerably, or they're still going ahead as planned. But if they're being cancelled or canned, it does make sense. Remember, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, especially when it comes to people's finances. I'd actually been told that the PlayStation 5 Pro was very expensive, possibly targeting somewhere around $700, although obviously not an exact price right now because we're so far from launch. So it would be targeting a premium VR experience, and from what I understood, some of the improvements included better ray tracing during VR, like multi-bounce, generally higher quality visuals, and for regular 4K screens we would see higher resolutions when running in high frame rate modes. For example, some games hit 1080p, we saw that with titles like Returnal for example, multi-bounce RT, potentially path tracing, and a bunch of other improvements. But again, at this point, just given the world conditions at this stage, it's not just a case of like, can customers afford it, but these companies, like for example Sony, it's obviously the marketing campaigns, developers as well, they would need to invest resources into creating, let's say, the PS5 Pro version of titles or the Xbox Series Pro versions of titles, and it would just be, well, a lot of additional resources. That's not to say it's not happening. I'm still getting really mixed opinions of whether the PlayStation 5 Pro, for example, is occurring. Some people are telling me it is, some people are telling me it's delayed. But again, with the next generation consoles on the horizon, with the PlayStation 6 and so on, I think it's very possible that they're going to be canned. And I'm very interested to see what the PlayStation 6 has, in terms of capabilities. I suspect we're going to start to see some leaks fairly soon with what their vision is. It's going to be very interesting actually, because so far we haven't had any really in-depth GDC presentations that have gone into, detail of what the pain points are for this generation of consoles. We saw that with the PS4 and the Xbox One. We saw some really interesting stuff. For example, we saw how awesome the CPU performance was with the Xbox One. We saw some of the cool stuff that the PS4's GPU could do with asynchronous compute. But this hasn't really occurred with this generation. Microsoft have been a bit more forthcoming with detail, but even they have a lot of stuff that they've not really gone into detail with. So I think when we start to see what the pain points are for developers, we can probably start to understand what has changed with the next generation, what the issues are, what's going to be fixed. I still feel that the core counts are going to be much lower than what we see with desktop. Instead, we're going to have faster, narrower cores, which push as much data as possible. But it's going to be very interesting, not just the stuff, like how many T-flops it's going to have, that type of thing. But I'm very interested to see what new emerging technologies get pushed in, like AI. With that said, guys, hopefully you have enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Leave a like on the video. Apologies for my voice sounding a little off for this video. I'm getting over the plague. I'm mostly over it, but you know what it's like when you're kind of getting over the residue of the gook. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.